Okay, guys, we is live. We is live right now, and we finna discuss this David situation. You know, we got a lot of things. Let me try to fix this. All right. Yeah, we got a lot of things to discuss about this David situation. David and Celeste. Here we go. We're gonna get right into it.
There are a lot of updates for you in the case of David, the singer accused of murdering 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Her father speaks out about their purported relationship, more questions about this Santa Barbara trip, cell phone evidence, and was David caught on camera apologizing for the smell of a dead body? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so we have more on the latest in the criminal case against David. 21-year-old singer David Anthony Burke, who is currently charged with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains out in Los Angeles. This is all in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who, as we know, was found dead, dismembered, decomposed, reportedly found in David's Tesla at a Hollywood tow yard back on September 8th of last year. He has entered a not guilty plea. Always important to remember that he is innocent until proven guilty, and I've been saying that for the last, week, 2 weeks, because the allegations against him are not only so serious, but also potentially so damning. I mean, the evidence, we've gone through at least 2 episodes where we've broken down what the purported evidence is from prosecutors against him. So what I want to get into today are some updates from the alleged Santa Barbara trip to cell phone evidence to a statement from Celeste's father. A lot more information I want to get into. And to just put it into context, and again, I'm not going to repeat it all here. I did previous sidebars on all this. You can check it out on Law and Crime's YouTube page, where I laid out all the potential evidence that prosecutors claim they have against David. But basically speaking, we are talking reportedly forensic, digital, testimonial, surveillance evidence. And essentially, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office claims that David was in an illegal sexual relationship with this 14-year-old girl, that it happened ever since she was 13, that she threatened to expose him, would destroy his career, invites her over to his place in LA, gets her a ride share there, all the way from Lake Elsinore, allegedly quickly kills her once she arrives. Remember, multiple penetrating injuries. That's according to the forensic report, right, the ME's office. And then reportedly proceeds to sloppily dispose of her body by allegedly dismembering her and buying items online to help with the disposal. Prosecutors have referenced.
All right, now let me pause it right there. Now, he bought a body bag. He bought a uh, 2 chainsaws, a body bag, and an inflatable swimming pool, and all these things are screaming something is wrong with these purchases. Uh, I think somebody should have checked into these purchases. But let's get back into it. Like, how can you buy a body bag? How can you buy a body bag and all these murder utensils, chainsaws, and all kinds of stuff? And did nobody knock on David's door like, hey, bro, what's going on over here? What kind of party is you throwing that you need body bags, bro? But here we go.
A shovel, chainsaws, body bag, laundry bags, a blue inflatable pool, that he allegedly made these purchases under a fake name, Victoria Mendez. Brutal crime.
Victoria Mendez.
Brutal crime. All right. Now, when I say updates, I want to turn to a lot of these, and I'm not going to do it alone. I want to bring on somebody we haven't had in quite some time. Actually, I don't think we've had him on since David was arrested and charged and all of this potential evidence has been revealed. Retired Detective Matt Irvine joins us. Matt, good to see you. You and I have been breaking down this case for a while before David's arrest. So, but even before I go into the updates, I just am curious, 2 questions for you. A, what do you think of all the evidence generally speaking?
I mean, it's quite shocking how somebody can get all these crazy purchases. Like, I'm fit to buy all these murder things, and nobody is knocking at my door. No FBI, not the police. Did nobody want to check into none of this, none of these chainsaws and stuff that David was doing, you know? And what was he thinking? Okay, this dude's supposed to be rich as hell. If I'm rich as hell, let me tell y'all something. You know, if you gonna do it, you might as well do it right. And if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it right. And you get a barrel of acid because you got to remember, acid, it goes through bone and everything. Acid dissolves everything. So if I'm gonna go ahead and off somebody, you know, you got to do it right, okay? And he did it the wrong way, man. He really did. He did it the wrong way. You know, he did it the wrong way, guys. He really did. You know, I mean, it's just a lot of shocking things just coming out with this situation.
Investigation is, how accurate the investigation is there a disagreement between the Los Angeles PD and the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office? So to see this potential breadth of evidence, how much they have, in my opinion, I wonder if it's a sign to the public, let's do our jobs, look what we have, look at the case that we're building. All right, real quick, before we go any further, for all you cat owners out there, who doesn't want their cat to be healthy?
You know, and the whole situation is, you know, he did it all wrong. You know, if I'm rich, I can afford some acid. Okay, I mean, he chopped this girl up. He chopped her up, and you know, put her in little pieces, and
And their fresh ingredients, they are gently cooked to retain all.
you know, put her in pieces. But it's a better way to do it. It is a better way to do it. You know, he got a lot of money. That's what I'm getting at. He got a lot of money. If I got a lot of money, I can afford a barrel of acid. Okay? Without no body, ain't no crime. Okay? With no body, there's no crime. No face, no case. Everybody know, no face, no case.
Hearing. I'm going to talk about why I'm mentioning this again. There's an update to it. So just going from the brief to provide some context, it says, despite knowing she was dead and her family was trying to find her, the evidence will show defendant lied and claimed he didn't know where she was. In fact, defendant drove to Santa Barbara County immediately after the victim died, attempting to dispose of her property and destroy evidence. At approximately 11:30 p.m. on April 23rd, 2025, he drove away from his home as he texted and called the victim's phone asking where she was. Again, these were acts calculated and planned to set up his defense within a very short timeline after the victim's vicious murder. Defendant drove his Tesla north on the 101 freeway to San Marcos Pass Road, SR 154, near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. He returned home early the following morning on April 24, 2025, before going to a radio interview for the release of his album that week. He sent 2 additional texts to the victim's phone that day, which obviously went unanswered because she was already dead. After April 26, 2025, defendant never attempted to contact her again. I've said this before, that if that's true, if the prosecution can establish that, that's bad, because he's going to claim he had nothing to do with it, and he had this whatever connection to her whatsoever, even at the very least a friendship. Prosecutors are saying it was an illegal sexual relationship. Never tries to contact her again after she goes missing. So again, that's an important allegation. Then it says, on May 8, 2025, defendant returned to the same area in Santa Barbara County, leaving his home at around 11:30 p.m. He returned to the area again on May 31st, 2025. This is an isolated site off SR 154 where the victim's identification was subsequently discovered in January 2026. Additionally, on July 7th, 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered a burn cage to his home under the same fake name as part of his plan to incinerate evidence. Defendant's cellular activity indications derived from defendant's iPhone and Tesla, which demonstrate defendant's activities from April 22nd, 2025 to April 24th, 2025, including a trip to Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night after the victim arrived at his Hollywood Hills home. Why am I talking about that? What's the update? Steve Fisher. We've had him on the program multiple times.
Yeah, so Dave can, he tell her, come on over, baby. And like soon as she got there, he offed her. And then he started texting her phone, is you still coming? You still gonna show up, baby? Where you at? Baby? I ain't heard from you in a minute. It's been like an hour now. Where you at? So, I don't know what kind of plan this was, but, if I just got a $3 million record deal, I would have been able to plan this out much better. Much better. Here we go.
Has a gate that is closed from sunset to sunrise, so his car would likely have had to stay relatively close to SR 154. There are trails that lead down to the water, so someone could dispose of a chainsaw or other evidence there. Given how small and weak David is, I do not believe a chainsaw or other heavy evidence would be far into the water. The water is clear, and I was able to see several feet into it with the drone. I have a couple thousand high-resolution images from the area to process. I have attached a few low-resolution preview images to give an idea of the terrain. Hashtag Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Hashtag David. Before I go any further, Matt, you tell me what you take away from that.
Well, the first thing you talked about, his activities in the immediate aftermath of Celeste's killing, I think are really telling, because I think they defeat any argument that this was an accident, an overdose, or even some crime of passion. It really speaks to what the prosecution is alleging in their special circumstance allegation of lying in wait, which is that he lured her to his home with the intention to kill her. And the reason I say that is an accident, a crime of passion, it would be hard to imagine that somebody would have the presence of mind in the minutes afterwards to essentially stage an alibi for themselves by sending multiple texts to a person that they just killed. And then to then immediately, within minutes or hours of her death, drive all the way to Santa Barbara County to dispose of some kind of evidence. Again, speaks to this being a premeditated crime and not an accident or a crime of passion. He was just too busy, too calculating, too quickly after her death for this to be anything other than a premeditated homicide. As to the multiple trips, and I think that also ties in with the multiple online orders that we're seeing evidence of. It seems like in the days and weeks following her killing, he engaged in a lot of activity to try to cover up what he did.
And David engaged in a lot of activity, and he was very busy, and he was trying to cover it up like a lot, but he was just going about it the wrong way. Like, what type of plan is I'm gonna pull this Tesla, I'm gonna have this Tesla towed or drove it around to this lot, and we just gonna leave it right here, and eventually somebody gonna smell this body in here, or these pieces of the body, and somebody gonna get this car towed, and then they gonna find her. So I don't know what type of plan that was. What you think? Wasn't nobody gonna find her? Or you think that they linked this car to you? Like, It's in your name, bro. I mean, the car was in his name. So, uh, I don't know. He could have thought of something a little bit better because somebody's gonna find the car. Somebody is going to investigate this smell. Somebody is going to wonder why all these flies and maggots is right here by this Tesla. Okay. So I don't know exactly what his whole thought process was here, buddy. Like, what is you, bruh? You do know they gonna find the body, right? You do know that, right? So why would we just get this car towed and to the what was it? Where did they find the car at, Abigail? They found the car. It got towed. So he parked the car down the street from his house in this spot where he knew it was gonna be towed at. He knew it was gonna get towed. So the tow truck came and they towed it to the tow yard. And then they found the pieces of the girl in the tow yard. Okay. But I don't know what type of plan that was because of course if the car get towed, they gonna find out about it. Like I don't know what type of plan that was. It's ridiculous. All right, here we go.
Was found. Maybe he didn't bring the phone, but didn't think about the license plate reader. This goes to a question: how can they track him, Matt? And how accurate is that data? Is this something that can be questioned by defense attorneys successfully at trial? Or in your experience, if you're talking about cell phone records, license plate readers, that becomes very, very difficult for defense attorneys to argue about the reliability, the accuracy of that data?
It's pretty hard to argue with geolocation data, especially if you've got multiple sources of data. It's quite likely, because this is not a sophisticated offender, that he didn't think about leaving his phone behind. And if he brought his phone with him, that can be tracked very precisely. Even when the phone is off, there is usually some limited geolocation data available with most smartphones. That's how your Find My Phone app works, even if your phone's turned off or the battery's died. As to the traffic cameras, that's a very good source of evidence. It would be interesting to see who
Look at that, Abigail.
manages those traffic
They can even
cameras.
track your phone if
Which
it's
is the
off.
big company typically only keeps that data for about 30 days, but they contract with different localities and law enforcement agencies, and so that can be extended. It would be unusual to me if that data was available 6 or so months later, which would be the earliest that an investigation could have started because they didn't find poor Celeste until September. Traffic cameras are a possibility. I think more likely we're talking about geolocation data through the phone and quite possibly through the Tesla as well.
Next up, timeline. So from when prosecutors claim she was killed on April 23rd to his arrest to the charging, it's about a year, right? So Steve posts this. This is, again, an update. Can't stop thinking about the timeline of the murder of Celeste Rivas Hernandez.
You know, the mama and the daddy, you know, y'all, this is what I have to say. What the hell is a 14-year-old girl doing jumping in an Uber, going to see her boyfriend that live in Los Angeles? Okay? I don't understand. Where's the parenting at? Like, did nobody want to go, hey, wait a minute. You 14 years old. You finna go where? Because she lived, what, about an hour and a half away from David's house, Abigail? Yeah, about an hour and a half away from David's house. So a 14-year-old girl should not be jumping in a Uber, getting Ubered for like an hour and a half to her boyfriend's house.
There's also the question of storing a body at his manager Josh Marshall's rental house for 12 days while waiting for tools, with nearby neighbors and decomposition odors likely becoming noticeable within a few days, all while David was out of town and having to trust that nobody would enter a house that wasn't even leased to him. None of this changes the central point that David is responsible. He killed Celeste. That I am certain of. Like I said, the DA is likely correct in their theory. They're working with all the evidence. Hashtag David, hashtag Celeste Rivas.
Come back. You don't have to leave your family. Mom, you can't do...
Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Again, that is Steve's perspective, Steve's opinion on it. But he does raise interesting questions there, right?
Yeah, and again, it's certainly possible. I did read that, and I think Steve's theory or alternate theory, has some merit. His statement about the compressed timeline, I think, is less salient if you decide that David had made up his mind to kill Celeste at the time that he lured her to his home. I think if he'd already made up his mind in the days or hours prior to inviting her over, the fact that he staged the phone calls and made the trip to Santa Barbara so quickly thereafter makes more sense. Steve's right that a lot of the evidence in this case had not yet come into David's possession, but there would have been Celeste's passport card. It could have involved her phone, and it could have been a trip to dispose of the murder weapon. So all of those items would be things that David might want to get rid of as soon as possible. As to the idea that she was killed out in Santa Barbara, that's certainly possible. I would be wondering about evidence of a struggle or blood inside the Tesla. That would require David then, after killing her in Santa Barbara, to put her body in his car and drive it 100 or so miles back to Los Angeles, which would be a very risky thing for him to do, whether he did it immediately afterwards or 2 weeks later. So possible, yes, but as Steve said, the LADA and the LAPD are the ones who are working with all the evidence, and they seem to believe that the evidence shows she was lured to his home to be murdered there.
And risky, I mean, it's also risky allegedly murdering somebody in this house that he was leasing, right? So it does become a question too. Here's another part, another update that I want to talk about, another aspect. So prior investigation and her movements. So this court paperwork, this brief, reveals that investigators had apparently been looking into David for quite some time. Not about Celeste killing, but about this apparent relationship. Remember, he is charged with having an illegal sexual relationship. So the filing says detectives learned the victim had been reported missing to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department by her family who live in Lake Elsinore in February and April 2024. RSSD telephonically contacted defendant on February 17, 2024, and after they identified a phone number in the victim's phone records that belonged to him. During the call, defendant claimed he had spoken to the victim last on February 13th or 14th, 2024, but stated he was unaware she was a minor or that she had been reported missing. RCSD advised him that Los Angeles Sheriff's Department deputies would be coming to his home. On that day, defendant was living at 804 North Doheny Place in West Hollywood. RCSD requested that LASD conduct a welfare check at defendant's home. LASD deputies went to defendant's home that night at 8:15 p.m. and informed him the victim was a 13-year-old runaway. Defendant again claimed he was unaware she was a minor and he had only met the victim once in person in November 2023. However, defendant showed deputies a yearbook photo of the victim he had on his cell phone. Although he claimed to be unaware of where the victim was at the time, she returned home 2 days later. Despite being informed by law enforcement the victim was only 13, defendant continued to pursue her. After the victim returned home in February 2024, her parents took her cell phone away. Defendant drove to Lake Elsinore and paid a junior high school student in the victim's class $1,000 to give the victim a cell phone defendant purchased so they could stay in contact. Throughout 2024, the victim spent a significant amount of time with defendant, including summer weekends at his home in the Hollywood Hills and traveling with him to Las Vegas, London, and Texas to meet his family. I say all that. Here are the updates. Steve, back to Steve, posts this. Minors such as Celeste Rivas Hernandez cannot just travel to London without consent. Here are the laws in the UK about minors traveling with an adult that is not their parent. U.S. citizens do need an ETA visa to travel to or through the UK. You'll need to show that your parent or guardian consents to your travel and accommodation arrangements. If you do have to apply for a standard visitor visa, you'll need to identify the adult traveling with you in your visa.
Yeah, that is wild. You know, I mean, my man had a career going. He had a hot little thing going on. He just became rich as hell. And he threw it all away because he wanted to be messing with minors. And to my understanding, Celeste was threatening him, saying, since you're going to have all these women, all these other minors, because I guess he had other minors, you're going to have all these other minors, I'm going to tell what you've been doing to me. And David was like, oh, no, you ain't, baby. So that's a sad situation. You would think that her parents would have been, her parents would have did something about that. Wouldn't let her go at nighttime, getting in an Uber at night. For to go for a 2-hour ride. A 2-hour ride. That's some wild stuff right there. That is wild stuff, people. All right, we finna get into the topics because we moving right along. We is moving right along. Yeah.
More from the red carpet. The Met Gala is in full swing here in Midtown Manhattan, and the stars are all coming out with superb looks. Tonight's dress.
Superb.
From baseball to something that goes with baseball. Hot dogs and chili.
Do not want a nice shiny stainless steel finished kettlebell.
That'd ruin everything, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
It was all shiny and puffed up.
No, we don't want that.
The key part of that story, Ben's closed for 4 months for renovations, but the work took 9 months. 3, 2,